The sound of Mrs. Beatrice Caldwell crying on her front porch at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning made me drop the wrench I was holding. I walked straight across the street without even thinking. Beatrice was 78 years old and had lived in that house for 42 years. I had never seen her cry. Not even when her husband, Henry, suddenly passed away just 3 years ago. Not when her son moved away to California. Not ever. But there she was, sitting on her porch swing with a piece of paper in her shaking hands. Tears streamed down her face, like her world had collapsed. I am Howard Barrett. I am 56 years old, and I have lived across the street from Beatrice and Henry Caldwell in our quiet Austin, Texas neighborhood since my wife and I moved here decades ago. Henry had been my absolute best friend. We had fished together every single Sunday morning for 2 decades. When he died of a heart attack while mowing his lawn, I held Beatrice's hand at the funeral. I had promised Henry I would always look after her. And right now, looking at her broken down on that front porch, I felt like I was completely failing that important promise to my best friend. I asked Beatrice what was wrong and sat down next to her on the porch swing. She handed me the paper with trembling fingers. It was a bill from something called Oak Creek Property Management. The total amount on the paper made my vision go blurry with pure rage. 'Twas for $89,750. I asked Beatrice what this was all about. She sobbed, her voice barely a whisper, saying she didn't know. She said they had been sending her violation notices for 6 months. They fined her for her garden, her mailbox, and her roof. They were fining her for everything Henry used to take care of. She told me she had been paying them because she thought she had to. She had already paid them $32,000. She had drained the money from Henry's life insurance. The paper said she still owed almost $90,000 more. If she didn't pay in 30 days, they threatened to foreclose on her house. My hands started shaking. It wasn't from fear, but from pure white-hot fury. I asked Beatrice exactly how long this had been going on. She told me it started right after Henry died. A man came to her door claiming he was from the HOA. He said there were violations Henry had been ignoring. He was wearing an official uniform, had a shiny badge, and showed her paperwork. She thought it was entirely real. She had been paying them every single month, taking money straight out of her retirement account, and they just kept telling her that she owed even more. I read through the bill carefully, forcing myself to stay calm for Beatrice's sake. Inside, I just wanted to put my fist straight through a brick wall. The listed violations were completely insane. They charged her $15,000 for an unauthorized memorial garden for a deceased spouse. That was the small, beautiful flower bed Beatrice had planted strictly in Henry's loving memory. They charged $8,500 for non-compliant grief counseling signage. That was just a small wooden sign in her garden that read, "In memory of Henry Caldwell, beloved husband." There was a $22,000 fine for improper widow maintenance of property standards. They were literally charging this poor woman thousands of dollars just for grieving her dead husband. I looked at the bold signature at the bottom of the page. It read, "Julian Cross, President, Oak Creek Property Management." I told Beatrice to listen to me very carefully. I told her this wasn't real. We don't have an HOA in this Austin neighborhood, and we never have. I told her someone was brutally scamming her. Her eyes went wide. She argued that he had a uniform and official papers. She cried that he said Henry had been ignoring violations, and now she was responsible. I assured her it was all fake and that I was going to handle this. I asked for Julian Cross's contact info. She pulled out a folder with shaking hands. Inside were 6 months of violation notices, payment receipts, and letters. They all looked highly official, but they were complete and utter fraud. The contact information listed a local address in Austin, a phone number, and business hours. I told Beatrice not to pay them another penny, not to answer their calls, and not to open her door. She cried, saying they threatened to take her house. I promised her they couldn't take her house because they had zero legal authority. This was outright extortion, and I was ending it today. I stood up, but Beatrice grabbed my arm tightly. She begged me not to do anything dangerous. She said she couldn't bear it if something terrible happened to me because of her situation. I looked at this woman who had been my neighbor for decades. She had brought casseroles when my wife had surgery. She had watched our kids grow up. She was essentially a part of our own family. Henry had been my brother in everything but blood, and these ruthless bastards had targeted his grieving widow the second he died. I told her I wasn't going to do anything dangerous, just necessary. I walked back to my house and made 3 urgent phone calls. The first was to my son, Jason, who was a detective with the Austin Police Department. The second was to my lawyer, Thomas Lockhart. Thomas had handled my construction business contracts for 15 years. The third call was to the phone number listed on the fake HOA paperwork. A smug man finally answered the line. Oak Creek Property Management. "This is Julian Cross," he said. I told him my name was Howard Barrett, and I was calling about Beatrice Caldwell's account. He casually noted her account was delinquent. He smugly asked if she was calling to arrange a payment. The casual way he said it, like he wasn't completely destroying an elderly widow's life, made my blood boil. I set the record straight. I told him I was calling to inform him that I knew he was running a scam. I said Mrs. Caldwell had contacted law enforcement and he should leave town before being arrested for elder abuse. There was a pause. He claimed he didn't know what I was talking about, stating Oak Creek was a legitimate organization enforcing community standards. I told him there is no Oak Creek HOA here. I told him I have lived in this neighborhood for decades. I knew he was targeting elderly widows with fake violations and extorting them. I firmly told him he had picked the wrong widow this time. There was a longer pause. He threatened that if Mrs. Caldwell had complaints, she could appeal. He warned me that interfering with legitimate HOA business would result in more fines for her property. I simply told him I would see him in exactly an hour at his office. I advised him to have his lawyer present, and I hung up the phone before he could even respond. The trap was officially set. My son arrived at my house 30 minutes later in his unmarked police car. Detective Jason Barrett looked just like a younger version of me. He had the same protective instinct for people we loved. He grew up calling Henry and Beatrice his uncle and aunt. He asked if this was really about Aunt Beatrice. I handed him her heavy folder. Jason read through the fake notices and payment receipts. I watched his expression quickly shift from professional interest to cold, calculated fury. He was disgusted they charged her $15,000 for a memorial garden. He called it elder abuse. He promised to arrest everyone involved, but said we needed to do this right. We needed hard evidence of fraud, proof the HOA didn't exist, and documentation of the extortion. He started making calls. Thomas Lockhart arrived 20 minutes later with his briefcase and a grim expression. I showed him Beatrice's documents and he immediately started taking notes. He confirmed it was financial abuse. Thomas recognized the signature of Julian Cross. He said there was a similar scam in San Antonio 3 years ago. Cross got probation because the terrified victims were too scared to testify. I told them he wasn't getting away this time. We were all going down to his office together to end this today. We drove to the address listed on the fake HOA paperwork right in the heart of Austin. It was a small office building in a cheap strip mall. It was sandwiched right between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. The sign read, Oak Creek Property Management, Professional Services. Jason checked the business registration on his phone. It was a real LLC filed 6 months ago, but that didn't make it a legitimate HOA. It just meant he knew how to file basic corporate paperwork. We walked right in. The office was small, with just a reception area and a back office. A woman at the desk looked up nervously. She asked if she could help us, but I demanded to see Julian Cross. She asked if we had an appointment. Jason pulled out his real police badge. He introduced himself as Detective Barrett from the Austin PD and stated this was definitely not a social call. The color drained from her face. She stammered that she just worked the front desk and didn't know anything. I told her to get her boss immediately. A man in an expensive suit emerged from the back. He had slicked back hair and a confident smile that instantly died the second he saw Jason's police badge. He nervously asked what this was about. Jason confirmed he was Julian Cross and introduced us. Julian's smile returned, but it was incredibly strained. He asked if Mrs. Caldwell was finally ready to settle her outstanding balance. I stepped forward before my son could even stop me. I demanded to know what her balance was for. For violating HOA rules that don't exist. For living in a neighborhood with no HOA. For planting flowers in memory of her dead husband. Julian recognized my voice from the phone, claimed his HOA had legitimate authority granted by property covenants filed with Travis County. Thomas, my lawyer, immediately interrupted him. Thomas demanded to see the legal documentation proving Oak Creek had authority over Beatrice's property. Julian hesitated, claiming the documents were on file and he didn't need to prove anything. Thomas pulled out his phone. He stated he had checked with the county recorder's office on the drive over. There were 0 HOA covenants filed for our neighborhood. There never had been. Thomas demanded again that Julian show his legal authority. Julian grew highly defensive. He lied, claiming the HOA was recently reactivated by majority vote and the covenants were being filed. I called his bluff flat out. I told him he created a fake HOA to target my neighbor when she was vulnerable. He had extorted $32,000 from her by pretending to have legal authority. I told him it was elder abuse, fraud, and extortion, and it was ending right now. Julian wavered, claiming we couldn't prove anything. Simply pulled out a digital recording device. Jason explained that my phone call was recorded. Texas is a one-party consent state. Julian had admitted to charging Beatrice for fake violations and had threatened more fines when warned to stop. Thomas opened his briefcase. He handed Julian an emergency restraining order filed on behalf of Beatrice Caldwell. He was legally prohibited from contacting her or threatening her property. A single violation of that order would result in immediate arrest. Jason added that Julian was under criminal investigation for elder fraud, and the state attorney's office was very interested. We promised to find every single elderly person he had scammed and force him to refund every penny. Julian's composure completely shattered. He desperately tried to claim it was a legitimate business. Jason coldly told him fake HOAs only have the authority to send people to prison. He ordered Julian to hand over every record, violation, and payment receipt for every person he had contacted. Jason told him he could either sit in an interrogation room and explain his scam, or be arrested right then and there for elder abuse and extortion. Julian looked at us and the fight died in his eyes. He quietly said he wanted a lawyer. Jason called it a smart choice and pulled out his steel handcuffs. He formally placed Julian Cross under arrest and read him his Miranda rights right in the lobby. The receptionist started crying hysterically. She swore she didn't know it was illegal and just sent the letters Julian told her to send. Jason assured her she wouldn't face charges if she cooperated. Over the next 3 weeks, the investigation expanded massively. Julian hadn't just targeted Beatrice. He created multiple fake HOAs across Austin, specifically targeting grieving elderly widows. His cruel method was always the exact same. He would wait for an obituary, identify properties owned by the surviving spouse, and send fake violation notices within months of the tragic death. He had stolen over $600,000 from 43 different victims across 3 counties in just 18 months. The Texas Attorney General's office took over the massive prosecution. Julian was charged with 43 counts of elder abuse, fraud, extortion, and organized scheme to defraud. Faced with over 200 years in prison, he took a desperate plea deal. He was sentenced to 28 years in the Texas State Penitentiary. He had absolutely no parole eligibility for 15 years. At his sentencing hearing, Beatrice gave a victim impact statement. I sat right behind her for support. I watched this sweet woman, who had been so broken months ago, stand tall and look her abuser dead in the eyes. Her voice was incredibly steady and strong. She told Julian he came to her home just 2 months after Henry died. She was still crying herself to sleep and finding his glasses. He saw her deep grief and decided it was just a financial opportunity. She shamed him for charging her $15,000 for planting memorial flowers. She shamed him for trying to steal the home where she and Henry had celebrated 52 beautiful anniversaries. She told him if Howard hadn't fought for her, she would be homeless. She hoped that every single day he spent in prison, he would think about the grieving widows he exploited and never hurt anyone again. The judge ordered Julian to pay full restitution to all 43 victims. Beatrice got her $32,000 back, plus extra damages. Everyone he targeted got their stolen money back. Texas even passed new legislation, making it a specific felony to create fake HOAs to target the elderly. The new law required all HOA documents to be heavily verified before any enforcement actions. They officially called it Henry's Law, honoring Beatrice's late husband. Beatrice still lives in her house across the street from me. The memorial garden for Henry is even bigger and more beautiful now. She has a beautiful bench where she sits every evening. The sign with Henry's name is still there, perfectly legal, and nobody will ever charge her for it again. I kept my most important promise to Henry. Last Sunday, I was getting ready to go fishing alone, just like I had done since Henry died. Beatrice called out from her porch. She said Henry wouldn't want me fishing all alone on a Sunday morning. I smiled and asked if she was offering to go. She said she was too old, but her 13-year-old grandson, Logan, was visiting. He had never been fishing, and Henry would have wanted him to learn. So I took young Logan fishing. I taught him to bait a hook, cast a line, and wait patiently for the bite. It was exactly how Henry had taught me so many decades ago on that exact same Texas lake. Watching that kid's eyes light up when he caught his first fish, I felt like Henry was right there with us, smiling down. That is what protecting your family and your neighbors truly means. It isn't just about stopping the bad guys. It is making sure the people you love are safe. It is making sure their grief isn't exploited and that their precious memories are deeply honored. Julian Cross thought he could easily prey on widows. He forgot that some widows have neighbors who keep their promises. Neighbors who walk across the street when they see tears and fight for justice. Beatrice's house is still standing, and Henry's memory is honored. And somewhere in a Texas prison cell, Julian Cross has 28 long years to think about the day he targeted the wrong widow.